19 nations, 142 athletes, negotiating 111 competitive sleds. That's the participation here over 5 races over the weekend in Sigulda, Latvia, as the EBERSPA Luge World Cup Tour continues with its 4th stop of the season. Hi again, everyone. I'm Tim Singer. Welcome to Latvia. It's become an annual stop here on the World Cup Tour as we get set for today's men's singles competition. Yesterday, 3 races were held: women's doubles, men's doubles, and the women's singles. 3 different nations ended up on top of the podium. The races were won by Germany, Austria, and Latvia. Today we'll see if some of the other nations can get in on the fun as well as we get set for 30 racers in the men's singles competition. And a little later on today, it is the team relay. Right now, I'm pleased to reintroduce for the first time this season one of our regular co-commentators on the live streaming coverage of Luge from Team USA. It's Emily Sweeney. Emily, good morning.
Good morning, Tim, and thank you for having me. I'm happy and I'm excited to be back, and I'm excited for this race. It's going to be, this is one that already, if you watch the highlight reel, it made the highlight reel from last year multiple times because it's always exciting.
Always exciting. We're going to talk a little bit more about Jonas Mueller a little later on. Jonas, one of the best in the world this season, and he has struggled on this track mightily. As we're getting a good look at all of the athletes warming up. That's Leon Felderer jogging away from the camera. Emily, you were on this ice. I mean, we've talked about the last few years. You were on the ice yesterday. What's the condition like this season?
Right. The track is in fantastic shape. The track crew here has done a phenomenal job. It's very smooth, but it's built more kind of aligned what we expect for bobsled lines. So it's a bit different for luge sleds this year, but that doesn't really mean much. I think we've seen sleds struggle here year in and year out. Jonas is not alone in that. A lot of athletes, this is one of the most challenging tracks for them in the world, and we saw the results of that yesterday. Myself included, but that's just part of racing here.
And you had a pretty good race, Emily. What, 6th place, 5th place?
6th place. I can't be mad at it, but there's a lot to clean up. So I'm excited for an opportunity in Team Relay today to kind of put that run together like we all are chasing. But that's just a part of the game here in Sigulda.
As the athletes warm up, Emily refers to bobsled. They do 2-man bobsled on this track as well as skeleton. In fact, the World Cup was here a couple of weeks ago on the IBSF Tour. And Emily, this start area for the men is quite a bit different from the women's start. In fact, it's quite a bit different than any other start in the world. Describe a little bit of what these athletes are doing just to get to the start.
Right. I think this is it's iconic to Sigulda, right? Because it's such a high tower that the men have to take an elevator up multiple floors to get to their start. So this is unlike any track in the world. You see them looking down at Christers there doing his warm-up, but Dominic here is getting his warming up high on the tower. So it's pretty daunting, one, for the men as they are learning the track and they have to move up. This is one of the tracks that when you go from ladies start, as you said, which comes into curve 4 up to men's start, you see the visual difference of that height and that speed. So it's a pretty daunting one here, but we're all professionals, right? We're here. This is what we train for. So I'm excited to see these men kind of pull off the handles today.
That's right, and in just a couple of minutes we'll get a POV look at the track from top to bottom. But it's funny, athletes always talk about in run number 2 riding the elevator, but here in Sigulda that's literally true.
Right. When we say we want to ride the elevator, it means we want to move up a couple spots in the second run. But here everyone rides the elevator regardless of how your runs are.
Andre Manzi right there, he's one of 2 from Ukraine that will be competing today as all of the athletes are continuing their warm-up There's so many contraptions up there, Emily. Like the thing right there that David is pulling, and then you've got those little orange cones. It's a whole routine, isn't it?
It's a whole routine. We're fine. I feel like there's a Danny Ricardo quote coming through my mind right now saying, we're fine-tuned athletes, but we are. I know it looks like we just lay there a lot on the sled, but the amount of power that you have to tap into to be as explosive as you can on the start, you have to warm up all of your small muscles as well, or else you're going to get injured. And this is a sport where where experience matters, right? So the older you are, the better that is going to play, but at the same time, you need to make your body last.
Great point. And now we get a good look at the 3D look. We're about a 40-mile, 60-kilometer trip away from downtown Riga, which is the capital city in Latvia. And this track, as Emily has already spoken of, has got a lot of tough little areas, including right down here in the bottom third. So that's a look at the cool graphics. But Emily, right now we're going to drone our way over to the men's start, and you can give us a tour from top to bottom.
All right, so we are up high in the air here, pulling off at the handles. The start is a really long entrance into this curve one, so you can see look for a lot of skidding there. Well, hopefully not from all these sleds coming through. The top curves, you're gonna see tight transitions, and they're really crucial for carrying speed down into the rest of the track. We talk about consequences on this track, right? Up until this point, the consequence is time. And then once you come through the labyrinth into these larger curves, curve 11 sets up this technical transition from 12 to 13. It's very quick, and things can get behind very easily, and you'll see the results of that coming into the straightaway in 14 here, into the highest pressure curve 15, into another straightaway with a little up a high point through the straightaway into the final Kreisel. So it's really technical, a lot of opportunity for mistakes, but also it's so much fun. This is an incredibly fun track.
That's what it's all about. Atmospherically speaking, you don't hear that a lot, it's about as perfect a day as you can have. A little bit of sunshine, a little bit of thin cloud cover, and the temperature is just below zero, so it's not that frigid cold we've had some weekends here in Sigulda, and it's not the really warm weather we had one weekend last year. It should be ideal, and the ice conditions will hold out, we expect. It certainly did all day yesterday. As you take a quick look at those track records, Ludwig, the Olympic gold medalist, set that back in 2014, the start record. That'll be a fun one to keep an eye on, Emily. Of course, yesterday, one start record was broken in women's doubles.
Yes, and I think we're seeing records fall left and right this season. It's been really interesting to watch, and I can't wait to see what happens today.
Kristers Apriots, you see right there on page 2, he should be one of the favorites. The Latvians, year in and year out, have their best results, not surprisingly, on their home track. But the Austrians, of course, have been dominating men's singles luge, at least over the last couple of weeks. We're unprecedented. 2 weeks in a row, Austria finished 1, 2, 3, 4 in men's singles. So sit back, we're getting ready for the action just moments away. I'm Tim Singer, along with Emily Sweeney, the star of A Luge Love Story. Emily, that was a great video.
Thanks, Tim. I know, if anyone, Dominic and I have been filling your feed, so there's been a lot of us. I hope you're tolerating it well, and sorry you'll have a little bit more of me today. And Dominic.
How about these spectators? This has been as impressive as we've seen, at least this season. They came out early yesterday.
Sigulda is such a great area. I love this town. I love coming here. I love how they celebrate sport and seeing all the kind of the crowds coming out to cheer their team on as well. It's just a testament to that.
Ready for the action, Alex Ferlazzo, rocking the beard in 2025. He'll be the first off. What that essentially means is he finished 5th on Friday in the Nations Cup qualifying race. They go 5 through 1 from the qualifiers before we move into the seeded group. It's been a bit of a slow start for Alex, who you remember, Emily, last year had some amazing results
He did. I mean, the one that sticks out the most, right, was World Championships in Altenburg. That was such an incredible result for Alex and also for Australia, right? This is so exciting to see Australia being represented in a winter sport at this level. He's looking really smooth so far. This is that first difficult transition, and look how smooth he made it. Look, it's looking really nice so far.
Alex, 29 years old, from Townsville, Australia. He trains with the Canadian team for the most part, although the Canadian team isn't here this week and he's on his own.
Alex is doing a great job, and like you said, he's been here on his own this week. A little early coming out of 14, but he handled it so well. You really saw him push, and same here. You're not seeing the sled oscillate back and forth from side to side. You're seeing straight pushes, and that's going to be so important for all of these sleds to build momentum.
48.195. As a point of comparison, that's about 0.7 of a second off of the track record. That'll be interesting to watch, especially as we move into the seated group.
That's a huge time from Alex right there. I mean, well done from Alex. From top to bottom, it looks pretty good. That's a little bit of an early exit at 14, but look how calmly, you can see his eyes and his facial expressions. He's not stressing it. He's calmly pushing back and just trying to carry as much velocity into those straightaways as he can.
I'll take that.
He'll take it.
Came for the second now. Let's go.
He knows how to work the camera. It's sort of reminiscent of Chris Master.
Wow, that's a bold comment there, Tim.
Here's Josef Ninnis, and if you've been following luge for the last 90 years or so, you've been following the career of Josef Ninnis, the grand old man on the World Cup Tour. Ninnis, 43 years old, and had a special day here 7 years ago. In the spring of 2018, late winter before the Olympics, he had his first and only podium on the World Cup.
I remember that day. That was so exciting to watch. He had a little bit of a bump there on the entrance of curve 1. It's not going to bode well for him. Ninnis does such an awesome job carrying the comfort on this track. He slides very well. A little bit early, too much cross into 6 there as well. So typically he's not the strongest starter, but really picks up time as he goes. And I'm seeing a little bit too many mistakes here early into curve 12. Too much height off the end. This is a sloppy run from Josef.
Uncharacteristic, as he appears to clean it up here down at the bottom of the straightaway, now into the closing Kreisel.
I'm surprised with that. I would have said that Alex had a much cleaner run, but Josef found speed even with those mistakes. So, you know, I'm sure he was really relaxing through all of those mistakes. You can minimize the time damage by simply accepting the mistakes. I know that sounds crazy, but we're in a sport that's timed to the 1,000th of a second, and the way you approach your mistakes really lessens the impact it has on your time.
Elaborate a little bit on what you mentioned a second ago, carrying the comfort. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so kind of the same thing, right? A lot of people, so these big curves, these are blind exits a lot of the time. That was curve 15 that we just saw, and there's so much pressure that most athletes will say, you lose your head, which means you can't physically hold your head up, it drops back. So you're blind on your exit. And with that, and your natural instinct is to tense up, but you really want to ease back into the sled.
Kaspars Rinks, the number 3 in the depth chart, the unheralded Latvian, but he had a career best top 10 finish in the second of 2 World Cup races held here last year. Finished 3rd at the Nations Cup on Friday.
He did a nice job of making that entrance pretty smooth. It's off to a good start.
It's a great point you made, Emily. Everyone's going to make mistakes, but if you don't overreact and you still let the sled do the work, that's the key to maintaining the speed.
And it's so hard to coach that, and it's late entrance into curve 11 there, but he has a great entrance into curve 12. He's back online. And it's so hard, it's difficult to coach that, right? Because it's your natural instincts that you're trying to work against, but that's where you see kind of the separation of the fields. Who can really commit to these lines, and Sigulda is a track that you cannot lie about that.
5 thousandths of a second, incredible. That's the separation between the Slovakian and the Latvian right now. We're only 3 sleds in to this 30 sled field with the first American waiting on deck.
Doesn't look like the strongest start in technique-wise there. He's really hunched over in his paddles, but I mean, the time, he's hanging there with the best of them, so he has something to work on for next season going to the Olympic year, but that was a solid run from him, and he did a really nice job of getting back online through the midsection of the track, and I think that just shows his comfort with this being his home track.
29-year-old Tucker West is the first from the United States in today's race. Tucker still looking for his first top 10 finish of the season. That's why he, for the first time in a while, has been relegated to the qualifying group. He finished second in that Nations Cup race on Friday.
Yeah, that was a good run for Tucker. Clearly that's not where he wants to be in Nations Cup this far into his career, but he handled it great. He's in a fantastic spot coming into this race, and he's off to a great start. He's looking really smooth. A little harsh on the curve 6 there, a little high through the labyrinth, but he's still in the green. A little late into 11 as well. These transitions are so critical because everything rolls right into the next curve. So you see a little bit more of a wave on 13, but a nice exit. He's fighting it, that little wobble of the feet. That's what we don't want to see.
But he stayed off of the wall, and now he makes his way to the final curve, the big finishing Kreisel. It'll be interesting to see where that pad is later today. 1200ths up on everyone. There's the biggest hand in the sport, right, Carolyn?
But did you see, I mean, that little fist pump from Tucker, I don't know if you classify it as fist pump, but that little shake of the fist, that's so great. That means he's happy with his run. When I say you see the wobble of the feet, you know, every sled setup is so different. So if he doesn't feel totally secure, that might just be the best way to check it as he's coming into those transitions. And he carried enough speed to be happy with it. So that's great. See the slide back and forth.
Right, but keeping it off the wall, not overcorrecting. How many times have we seen Tucker shaking his head in disappointment as he comes up the outrun? Well, he's shaking his head for the red light, but it was a good run. Now, like Tucker, Gins Berzinch has spent most of the last few seasons in the seeded group, but he's off to a rough start this year. His best finish, 11th. In fact, Emily, all of the Latvians until coming home this week have been struggling a bit in singles.
It's been, I mean, we're only at the 4th World Cup of the year, right? So we've had 3 races behind us. So some people take a little bit to warm up. Some people are kind of figuring it out. But I think to see as strong of a performance as we did yesterday from their team, it was so exciting to watch. And this is a track where, I mean, he's having a great run so far. And I think that we'll see more Latvian flags today as well.
The 2020 Youth Olympic gold medalist. Loves this track, knows this track. Perfect exit right there.
Oh, dropped the feet slightly. I don't know if that was completely necessary, but he had such a good exit out of 15 and a fantastic run.
By about 1/10 of a second, Latvia takes the advantage over the USA. Slovakia in 3rd place. These are the 5. The top 5 qualifiers from Friday will now move into the seeded group. But Emily, usually your top Nations Cup finishers are in the top 10 at the end of the weekend as well. It means they like the track.
Right. To be honest, though, with this track, anything can happen. I don't think we can really set, oh, you know, these top sliders are normally, are normally in the top 6. I expect some big mistakes today. And that's just the nature of what's been happening here. I'm included in that, so I'm not trying to out anyone, out of any of my fellow athletes here. It's just a risky track. So I think some of them could make it up onto the podium. That's not out of question. Top 10 is not the limit.
First of the Germans, Timon Grancagnolo, struggled on this track in the Tour World Cups last season with a 21st and an 18th place. He did have a career best 4th to open up this season in Lillehammer.
A little bit of a slower start there with 65. Something to work on. But he's sliding very smoothly. If you listen, I like the way his sled sounds going through. It's very clean. It doesn't sound like there's a lot of skidding happening on.
Trailing the Latvian by a pretty wide margin here at the midway point.
A little bit of hesitancy coming off of 15. With that line, I would expect that. He's just a little bit to clean up here, but not a bad run for the first run here.
Great little fun fact from Timon. He says he's part Italian, but he can't speak the language. And of course, Emily, as you know, there are a lot of Italian lugers that don't necessarily speak the language.
Well, yeah, I mean, South Tyrol, it's a German-speaking region.
Right.
But it's pretty interesting. I mean, maybe a lot of viewers might not know that Northern Italy used to be a part of Austria and then is swapped over. So naturally, they still speak a dialect of German, and there's a lot of language swapping around here. Difficult run, but okay.
And that sets us up for our first of those South Tyroleans, Leon Felderer, the athlete representative of the FIL's executive board. Leon is, I called him yesterday, a renaissance man. He's a commentator, he's a luger, he's an administrator, seemingly everyone's friend, right?
Man, really bumping him up there, Tim. What do you? He is. Leon's great. We're lucky to have him as an athlete representative. He enjoys the role, which is huge. Not everyone does. It's a lot of work that comes along with that, but he does a great job.
He made a great point. He said on this track more than any, you make one small mistake and it could very well compound for the next 4 or 5 curves.
It absolutely can. He's a little bit off in his 5.6, and you see that, just like he said, it followed him into the labyrinth there. So he's using a bit more of the curve than the ideal line, but right here is where the consequences turn into kind of physical pain instead of time, and he cleaned it up by then, so that was great.
Just a little peek up before entering the next curve. One more straightaway here into the Finnish Kreisel.
Slides across, but that wasn't bad.
Right, a little bit offline, right there at the bottom across the finish line. He still had this good speed working. 77 miles an hour is the fastest speed we've seen. Leon at 76.3.
Right, so it's been mentioned before, right? It's not the highest speed track, but a lot of the transitions are quite short. So that the speed feels higher because you don't have that time to adjust from your exit of one curve into the next curve. You just have to take what you get.
Right, that's what someone, I think was a former teammate of yours, Dan Joy, said about the Oberhof track, that it just feels so much faster than it really is.
Definitely, and that's the exact same reason, short transitions.
Here's David Nuschler, 23 years old. The Germans will be heading back home after this weekend. The next 3 races will be held in Germany, Altenburg, Winterberg, and again in Oberhof. And that is Nuschler's hometown.
Really strong paddles there from David, but a little bit of a harsher bump onto curve 1 than I would like to see, but his 2-3 looks pretty smooth.
He's been consistently hovering about the top 10 this year, 9th, 10th, and 11th place in his 3 races.
When Timon was going down, I was commenting on how nicely his sled sounded. With David, I feel like I hear a little bit more of that micro skidding going on, so it's not as smooth of a sound, which you're bleeding little bits of time, but it's really challenging to pinpoint which element you want to change to stop that. Oh, early bump onto Kreisel there.
To the finish in a time of 47.804, 8th place right now with his women's singles counterparts fan club watching down at the bottom. Still the 2 German superstars, Langenhahn and Lach, to come in just a little bit.
Here into curve 15, he has a nice line. You want to slightly bring the sled in, but it's really challenging. Look how quickly he got whipped to that right wall. He carried so much pressure over. He did a nice job of holding it as long as he could, but as the track kind of comes uphill there, you become weightless. So it's a lot more challenging, and that's what to control the sled, and that's what led to the right bump right before Kreisel.
The 45 podium positions so far this season in singles and doubles have all belonged to Austria, Germany, LATVIA. And if you follow luge, that's a bit of a surprise. Italy has been shut out, but Dominik Fischnaller has had some good results on the Sigulda track over the past several seasons.
He has, but he's really looking to break onto that podium, and I'm looking for it as well. There's no hiding bias, right? We all just watched our love story. I love Dominik, and I can't wait to see how he does today.
I like how you're not staying reserved on that anymore, Emily.
He's off to a great start here. Nice early entrance into curve 11, but an earlier entrance into curve 12 than he likes.
0.02 of a second trailing Berzinch right now. Good lines down here.
He's looking good. Same kind of extra pressure off to that right wall, but he handled it very nicely coming down into Kreisel.
This will be close to the finish. Dominik Fischnaller, 0.03 of a second out of the lead. All things considered, Emily, a very solid run.
It's a solid run, but there's a lot in there that he can clean up on. I mean, the Dominik that we all know, that we've watched slide, there's still a little bit extra that he can find in there. He's not looking quite as comfortable, but it was a good performance for run number 1.
A 9-time winner in his World Cup career to go along with an Olympic bronze medal.
This is that, see how quickly he had that direction right over to the right wall there, his right. You don't really want to see it, but how nicely he handled that without skids, without kind of a wall there. He has some things he can clean up for run number 2.
Top-ranked American. This is Johnny Gustafsson. Had a career-tying best top 5 finish in Lillehammer, Norway earlier this season. Johnny usually pretty quick here at the start.
He was really tight to that right wall coming down the start ramp. That's not ideal. I mean, you are cutting off distance, so you're balancing, right? You want to cut the distance, but you want to have a correct angle entering each curve. So he cut the distance, but he gave himself a harsh angle into the start curve there.
Big disadvantage already on the clock. Gustafsson last year in the 2 races here finished 12th and 16th.
A lot of pressure there on the end of 11. Big skid into 13. This is really challenging to right the sled here, but he does a great job coming out of 14. All of that started right at the entrance of 11. Right now, he's just trying to get to the end. This is a rough one from Johnny.
Across the finish line, the American back in 10th place out of the 10 that have come down. That was a case, you said he tried to right things, but little mistakes almost from top to bottom, right, Emily?
Really, the big one started in curve 11. He was almost too early and he bumped the wall there, and then once you start looping curves, this is curve 12, we had a little bit of a freeze, but 12 into 13, his height came too soon, and then he comes a little late into 13. He had a big skid into 13 there, and it's really challenging to stop that. Not what he wanted, he said. I know, man. A lot of athletes know that feeling in this race today, well, this weekend.
Sitting in 10th place, Gustafsson right now with 20 remaining, so he will very much be on that bubble as the first run moves along. Only the top 20 will qualify for the second heat. Well, here's a guy who certainly is one of the race favorites, even though he's back in 9th place in the World Cup standings. Kristers Apriots has all but owned this track over the past few seasons. Several of his World Cup victories have been right here at home.
Right, and he is in a great spot so far. So far, most of the runs have been kind of 2/10 a bit slower than seated training, or 2/10 faster than their runs, their final training runs. So he's actually in a good spot that he could challenge the track record today.
That'll be interesting to see. He's still in the red at the moment, now into the green by 1,000th of a second over fellow Latvian Gins Berzinch.
Look how flat he is coming off of 14, how blind. When I talked about carrying the comfort, the definition of that so far is Kristers Apriots on a sled. He's looking so good.
47.493. He is off of the track record, but well out in front. So right now it is a pair of youth Olympic gold medalists from Latvia leading the way, first and second place, with Italy in third, the USA in fourth.
Get a 63 start there, so you can give a little bit more on that, but it's still very respectable. But look how flat he is. Look how aerodynamic he looks coming off of these curves. Well done, Christers.
You can see the large Christers poster heads off in the background. Certainly one of the most popular athletes, any sport, in this sliding sports crazy nation of Latvia. Well, unless you've been asleep for the past month or so, you know, of course, that Austria has owned men's singles luge with places 1, 2, 3, 4 in each of the last two races. However, Emily, Austria's had a bit of a love-hate relationship here in Latvia on this track.
Right, but big skid there into curve 2. They're doing all the right things, right? At the end of last season, and harsh entrance into curve 5 as well. But he's in the green. Now it caught up with him. But they're doing all the right things. They stayed past the World Cups last season, and they got extra training here, and they're putting in the time to kind of overcome that fear. Another big skid coming into curve 13, high on the end. But a nice commitment to the exit there, even with that extra direction from David. But quick direction to the right wall coming out of 15.
This track is starting to bite some of the best athletes in the world. 5th place, that's a remarkable placing to be in 5th after what was noticeably, it appeared at least visually, some of the biggest mistakes we've seen.
Right, not luckily, he managed this, but his big mistakes that we saw came farther down the track. I mean, he did have a lot of skidding up top, so that I can't explain the time, kind of how he continued to build time through that, but this mistake happened so far down the track that he'd already built so much of his speed and therefore time.
Both the Penguin and George react to the slight errors by David Glacia. Thumbs down, he's got another run. He will likely qualify for the second heat. Now Jonas Mueller is up next. Jonas was interviewed earlier this week, a little YouTube short video about that awful crash 2 years ago where the sled was broken into pieces. He said, the crash is behind me. He feels pretty confident this weekend.
And that's how you have to approach things like this. I have big respect to Jonas. It's never easy overcoming fear, right? That's something that people ask all the time, right? Are you ever afraid in luge? And I had never been afraid until I had a large accident, and then I had to overcome it. And so I know that process well. So big respect to Jonas here. Great
point. As Jonas starts in the green, he's still in the green. Currently in second place in the World Cup standings, only 4 points behind teammate Nico Glacia.
He's sliding really well. Once again, if you listen to the sled, it sounds so smooth. A little bit extra pressure to his slider's right wall coming out of there, and he's moved back into the red. That's where you see how Christers was committed, and that's how he was able to pass by that. Even with all this Austrian speed they've had this year, Christers' kind of commitment and comfort on his home track is what's carrying him past them for so far.
Great point, Emily. It's the combination of driving ability as well as equipment and a lot of other factors that all go into being a great luge athlete.
Definitely. When you're timed in a sport to the 1,000th of a second, it's mind-numbing how many variables lead into that time, and that's what, you're on the podium, you're off the podium. It's such a small margin, and there's so many elements that need to come together.
And Emily mentions on the podium, off the podium. Our next athlete has been on the podium 2 of the 3 weekends here. Nico Glacia with a win in Innsbruck, followed up by a second place last week in Oberhof. That's why he dons that World Cup leader bib. 4 points up on Mueller in the standings.
Look how stable his paddles were. They really looked really strong coming through there. Good start for Nico. He sounds so quiet through those upper curves. even with that a little bit of extra height on the entrance of 6, it was such a quiet sled. I don't know, I'm really impressed. It's good sliding so far. A little bit
Split
of a late
time.
entrance.
Yep, 1200's up.
Great save in curve 14 there. Sorry, it happens quickly here, and he just was late, had a little bit of extra loop in 13, but he caught it very well in 14.
This should be a first place time, barring any late mistake. Gleicher across in a time of 47.627. So the World Cup leader establishes himself right in that spot, number 1 in the standings right now, with 3 remaining still in the seeded group. You caught something. That's why we have the athlete commentators, Emily, because you caught something down below his save, which I never would have picked up.
In the middle section, so if they show it again, those were his really stable paddles, so that was great to see. Here we're a little bit farther down. This is through Kreisel, so we won't see a kind of recap of it, but he did a nice job. Once things get offline, I mean, we say it all the time, right? We said quick, short transitions, so it's really easy for them to snowball quickly, and that's what leads to these really exciting mistakes that we can see here, but he did a great job of mitigating it.
Max Langenhahn has been a little bit quieter this year than the last 2 seasons, but by quiet I still mean great results, including 1 victory that was in Lillehammer. Comes off of a 7th place finish on his home track at the last race. Let's see what Max can do here in Sigulda, where he had 1 podium last season.
59 start, that's huge from Max here, so off to a great start, but he's already in the red. Did you hear that big skid coming into 5-6? It's not a good way to carry that speed.
400s off of the start record, but now, as Emily said, well into the red by 1400s.
He's a little bit behind through that middle section, but handles it very well coming out of 14. He looks very relaxed on the sled and very under control.
Max Langenhahn, 1 German still to come. He crosses in 4th place. Right now it's Gleicher, Aparios, Müller with another Austrian still to come. Langenhahn in 4th.
I think he's really chosen a setup where he has a lot of control in his sled. You even saw coming at the very last curve. Oh, pulled a little crooked coming out of the handles there. But even with that, still at a 59 start time. That's great for Max. For any of them, actually. Looks really in control through that whole run.
Felix Locke getting ready to grab those handles up at the start. Felix had a terrific 2-week run last year to close the World Cup season here in Sigulda with 1 victory. Actually 2 if you count the sprint, and a 2nd place finish. So he was the dominating athlete in men's singles.
He was 6'1", so he's 100 slower than his seated training run start time there. But Felix, his experience on this track usually shows, and it did last season. He really just has an understanding of the track. Each track kind of has its own personality, I like to say. And Felix understands Sigulda very well.
Probably has had more runs here in Sigulda than any non-Latvian athlete, at least competitive runs. Wow, great exit.
Great exit. He's over 2/10 behind. He's just not finding the speed, but his lines are there. He's looking really smooth. Just doesn't have the speed.
5th place right now for Felix Locke. Emily, do you know, do the Germans with their 2 regional programs, do they still have separate sled setups, or have they homogenized a bit between the 2 areas?
They're under a new head coach now, so I don't know what changes have come from that, but to my knowledge, there's still teams within teams, but I could be wrong.
Patrick Leitner, former Olympic gold medalist in doubles luge, has taken over from Norbert Locke as the head coach of Team Germany. I love that head way back, like Simon Pavlichenko.
It is. You have to watch, though. He may be messing with the aerodynamics beneath the sled. He was so far back. We don't see that often.
That's a good point.
There's limits on both sides here.
A little head drag. One more remaining here in the seeded group. Wolfgang Kindl, like Felix Locke, has been cruising along for over 16, 17 years on the World Cup. And like Felix, he's an Olympic medalist. Wolfgang won silver in Beijing in 2022. Currently third in the World Cup standings, doing double duty again this season.
That's so impressive. I mean, it's the load of sliding that doing both disciplines puts on your body behind big swing up into curve 6. It stayed pretty quiet, so I didn't hear a ton of skidding, but that's not the ideal line from Wolfie there. And a little bit late into 11, high, but a great entrance to curve 12.
Wolfie tends to find speed down here, even with the Austrian fast sleds. He's a fast glider down below.
He is, and that looked like a bottom man save there coming out of 14. So I mean that in the biggest compliment. He's getting, with the load, he has a lot of load, but he also has a lot of runs. So that's a lot of comfort on the sled as well. You can find through doing both disciplines.
9th place at the moment, so we've made it through the seeded group. So a slight recap of the standings here as we check out Wolfgang's replay, but we'll let Emily call this.
He was a bit behind coming into 14 there, and then he had so much height, came down in the middle, and that last bit of curve just caught him. But that's what I said, he had a bottom man save there, because that's typically their role in a double sled, and he handled it seamlessly.
Austria's 2 World Cup leaders, Nico Gleicher and Jonas Müller, currently in 1st and 3rd place, with Latvia's Christers Aperjots in 2nd, Langenhahn and Locke, both from Germany, 4th and 5th place. We move now back to the qualifying group. Emily, certainly all of these remaining 12, 13 athletes have a chance at the top 20, some of them a very good chance at the top 20. But top 10 will be a little bit of a stretch, I believe.
But Anton is one of those athletes who really has a solid chance at that top 20. He's such a great slider, and here it's basically the Ukrainians' home track, so they spend a lot more time here. So he has the runs, and he understands this track well.
In fact, he has 2 of his best ever results here last year in the 2 races, both 7th place finishes.
That's awesome. A little bit high, and you see a skid coming through curve 8 there. But he's back online in curve 11. Oh, and that was unexpected coming off of 14, kind of a big direction change a little bit. So he must have just carried some pressure through the curve that caught up with him in the straightaway.
Consequently, it cost him all his speed as he approaches the finish line back in 17th place, holding on to his start number, or only one person behind him, Johnny Gustafsson.
It's not looking good for a second run, but it's possible. You never know here. But here, he started coming off a little bit early, and then that last bit of curve just caught him and sent him into a large skid. He did a great job of righting the sled right before 15. So right here, it's such a crucial entrance because, as I said before, it's a blind exit there because of so much of the pressure. So he did a nice job of getting back where he needed to be, but by that time, all the speed had been scrubbed.
Dozens and dozens of Ukrainian flags on our YouTube chat window right now as Anton Dukash has just finished, but the second of the Ukrainians is getting ready at the start, Andrei Manzi. Andrei also had a rare top 10 finish last year here in Sigulda. As Emily said, this is effectively their home track.
It was so much fun cheering them on through that. It was quite the high first paddle from Manzi here. It was a little bit unstable, but he did a nice job of keeping the sled straight.
Tenth fastest start time of the 18 we've seen.
It's looking good. I can't tell if that's his feet tapping through those transitions. It's quite possible. There's a little bit of a sound coming through. But nice line so far, a little bit late, but he handled it very well into curve 12. He's fighting for these lines though. You're not seeing how smooth some of the other sleds look through. He's kind of having to correct quite a bit coming through. So nice entrance into Kreisel there.
Andrei Manzi of Ukraine to the finish. He is in 17th place. He and Anton Dukash are separated by about 0.3 of a second, with Monzi 1 spot ahead of him. Ukraine will be part of the team relay a little later on today, just one of 7 nations competing in the relay. And right now it's Monzi with the advantage over Dukash to get that spot.
I'm not sure. Each team kind of has their own criteria to how they choose who will compete in the team relay. There is the added element of the reaction gate, so sometimes that adds into who they choose.
And the USA uses fastest single run, if I'm not mistaken.
We have a new
used
policy.
to, at least.
Right.
Oh, what is it?
So the coaches are able to choose from the single fastest run from either run or the top finisher. So they have the potential to choose from 3 separate athletes.
All right. Svante Koala, unfortunately, will not take part in the team relay, as he and his sister and a few others make up only a singles program at the moment for Team Sweden. But we did see Svante with his sister in that new event, the mixed team event in Lillehammer, and we will see that again in a couple of weeks.
I'm a big fan of the mixed event. It's been really exciting, and it was cool to have them be able to take part as well without a doubles team. This was a way for them to use the gate for the first time. And great entrance. He's looking really good. Sorry, I was taken back a little bit slow in his time here, but the run's looking pretty good for Svante.
He had some decent results, 1 top 10 in the 2 races last season.
Little speed check there coming off of 15. He's a little bit uncomfortable, but he had to put together a pretty nice run.
Currently in 17th place. I mentioned it yesterday when Tova went, that not only are the 2 koalas competing every week, they're usually making the field out of Nations Cup. So what great slow and steady improvement, I should say, for the 2 of them.
Absolutely, but it's really fun to cheer for them as well. I mean, there's been a couple years where Svante's been super fast, and Oberhof specifically is sticking out in my mind. And he's just had, it's really fun to cheer for these smaller nations as they break in. Their partnership with Austria has been great for them. I think they have a good kind of balance of training with them and also getting some time at home. So.
Okay, happy. Almost okay.
Spectators still filing in. They are thrilled of the results of their Latvian athletes so far this weekend. Now Team Poland, Mateusz Sokovic. He's been opening the season with results in the low 20s, but came back with a 14th place in Oberhof. He's had some flashes of brilliance throughout his career.
And a 57 start time, that's a great flash of brilliance, but too early. And this big skid pretty up high up, that's going to scrub all of his speed that he just worked so hard to develop. Mateus is another one who, direction to 12 is something that we do not want to see. It's really slight, but that sets you off, and that's why he came so early out of 14. And not the entrance into 15 you want either. This is a stressful run for me to be watching right now.
Sorry about that. Mateusz Sokovic to the finish, back in 19th place. Right now, Johnny Gustafsson officially out of the competition. Anton Dukash on the bubble right now in 20th. You know, when we look at that straightaway, the 2 straightaways heading into 14 or 15 and 16, we're taking a little look at the start now. But Emily, I'm starting to see the track scratch up a little bit. Of course, it's all covered, but so many mistakes will pay a price for the track, right?
It's quite possible. Oh, that looks so harsh in the curve 6. Sorry. It is quite possible. I did see it had 87% humidity, which is really high, but it doesn't feel that way walking around. So I'm thinking that the track will hold fine, and it's very, as far as races go, this is a pretty even one, a fair ice condition.
Seiya Kobayashi of Japan, another underrepresented country in the sport of World Cup Luge, but Seiya, with this mixed team event, he also gets the opportunity to compete, which has been a lot of fun. Teams up with Elsa Desmond of Team Ireland. So Seiya looking for a spot here in the top 20. He had a 16th place finish in Innsbruck earlier this year.
Right, that was great for Saya. He really enjoys the Innsbruck Eagles track. And today, I think he's really trying to crack in for that second run. He trains alongside with the U.S. team, so I know him well. Little high in curve 11, big skid into 12. Fantastic correction in curve 13. He stopped the bleeding extremely well. It will pay in his time, but that was an incredible save by Saya.
And you can see the head is up a little more than most of the top athletes, just trading in a little bit of speed for a lot of safety. Kobayashi right now in 22nd place, his one and only run of the weekend. But as you said, a great save.
A fantastic save. So it's going to be disappointing not to see Saya in the second run, but he can walk away knowing that right here, see, he's too high, big loop into curve 11, and that sets up your transition into this all too critical 12-13. Artur Starzniak said, I think I can quote him as what he said earlier, if you're not afraid going into 12, you're doing it wrong. But that's the wrong type of fear. You really have to commit into that transition there. But Saya did a fantastic job. He was not where he wanted to be, but he corrected it very well.
Artur is, of course, famously one of the funniest guest luge athlete commentators we've had over the years. Marian Škupek now from Slovakia, struggled last year in the two races. His best result was a 22nd place. Let's see if he can push it up a couple from that. He has a pretty popular sled manufacturer among the small countries. It's a company called ME. Do you know that sled manufacturer?
I do. I've heard of them, yeah.
Yes.
Me, myself,
right.
and I, yes.
Exactly.
I mean, right, that's part of the sport. I'm so fortunate to be part of a program that has a lot of people working on that resource. But Škupek does a lot of the work himself, and it's such an intricate process. There's so many variables and elements that come together in a sled, so it's highly impressive. Really sitting up high, coming into the Kreisel finish corner there. That's not the type of run you want to see. He may squeeze in there for a second run. It's going to be tight.
He knocks Anton Dukash out of run number 2. There will be no Ukrainians in the second heat. But right now on the bubble in 20th place is Maciej Sokovic.
You're seeing with each paddle as he's coming down to the ice, his body is popping up. So he's leaving some of his kind of velocity out into the air there. He wants to push all of that through the ice. So you'd like to see a little bit more stability on those paddles from Marian.
And a little correction, Andrei Manzi of Ukraine is still in the hunt in 18th place. So the Ukrainians aren't out yet. Now it's Romania's Vali Cretu. One top 20 this year for Cretu, whose Olympic career dates all the way back to Sochi 2014. There are also a couple of athletes in today's race who raced in Vancouver in 2010, and one who was racing back in Torino in the Olympics in 2006. Can you guess who that is?
I can, but but as the person who's the oldest slider on the start list for the women's race here, you know, you say it like it's a bad thing. It's a great thing that
it's seasoned experience, able to do anything on any track.
Yes, exactly. A little bit of a skid into 13, a beautiful correction from Valentin here in 14, but a late entrance into 15. He's going to take the long line coming out. He did a nice job.
Cretu now looping a little bit out of the Kreisel into the finish, 47.539 for the moment. He's put himself in position for a second run. He's knocked Poland out of the second heat, and Slovakia's Marian Škupek is sitting on the bubble in 20th.
That was a good performance from Valentin. We'll see if it holds strong enough to make it in for a second run. that's such a late entrance into curve 12. You see how much height you can get and swing you over, but he wasn't comfortable with it, so he fought that height coming over into 13.
Generally, I can't translate that Romanian, but generally he's saying hello to his son back home in Sinaia, Romania. Alex Gufla, the final Italian, the youngest of the bunch, 22 years old, from South Tyrol, states as his occupation a police officer, which is not an uncommon second pursuit for a lot of international athletes.
Right, there's a lot of state programs across kind of the world that's how they support their athletes as well, so they can financially survive outside of the sport. So it's great Alex is a part of the Carbonari.
And the military has been big in that as well, I think, with you, right, Emily?
I was a part of the military for 10 years. I was really 10 and a half. I was really fortunate to be a part of the World Class Athletes program. So yes, the U.S. has a similar opportunity. Oh, great exit out of 14 there from Alex. He's looking really nice on the sled. Very peaky in 15. He's gonna have a lot of pressure. Can he hold it? He does.
To the finish, vying for a top 20, Italy's Alex Gufla, 19th place. This is a little exciting. Nothing's going to change at the top of the leaderboard, of course, with Nico Glacier heading the field, but that 19, 20, 21, there has been a lot of shifting over the last several sleds, and 3 still remain.
Look how nice he pushes back with that exit out of 14. He's carrying as much speed as possible into that long straightaway.
Actually, we have 5 remaining. Gufla sitting in 19th place. Valentin Cretu now in 20th. And from Poland, Arkadiusz Troja is getting ready to go at the top. This might be Arkadiusz's debut in the main World Cup race, at least this season.
Oh, that's great for him. Nice job. I think Poland gets a lot of extra training runs here in Sigulda. Sigulda is a very welcoming track to train at. A little bit of a bump there. It's just having some harsh lines in that upper section, and as we've been saying throughout this race, that's where you lose all your speed. Late entrance into curve 11, but a nice correction coming on the exit. So Sigulda, it's very welcoming. It's pretty open to giving training times in the fall. So I think Poland, Ukraine, they really take advantage of that and spend a lot of their extra time here getting some runs.
Troja of Poland sliding across the finish line with a 24th place time, exactly 1.5 seconds behind the leader, Nico Glacier of Austria.
See some personality there. See, it's tough to see personality through our helmets a lot of the times, but that's a great one.
Decent exit there.
He looked really, really comfortable on the sled. I think most of the mistakes, I mean, here right across the finish line, that's nominal, but most of his time was lost up in the top section of the track. Some rough entrances and exits.
Romania still sitting in 20th place. Italy, Alex Gufla, close to the bubble in 19th place. And a shout out to Ludwig Rieder, who's watching live this morning on the YouTube channel. Ludwig, we miss you. A one-time winner on the World Cup in men's doubles.
We do. I'm sure he's watching from Ronson, so cheering on his old teammates. It's great.
Daniel Marcinovsky, final Ukrainian, making his season debut on the World Cup.
He was looking really good up until that 5-6 transition. It was a little rough, and you see he's using a bit more of the curves through the labyrinth than I'd like to see, but like you said, World Cup debut for here, so that's a great, he's looking good for that. how calm his face looks through that face shield.
That's a key part of this sport, relaxation.
Yes, he was not early enough into Kreisel there, but that was a great first run. Unfortunately, he's one spot out from getting an opportunity for a second run, but well done.
3 still remain here. Sitting on the bubble in 20th place is Valentin Cretu. We've got 1 Romanian, 1 American, and 1 more Slovakian still to come. Do you think Valley's position is safe in 20?
I don't think anyone's safe, right? It's
Okay,
Sigulda.
that's
Anything
Sigulda.
can happen.
Good answer.
And there's some good names coming up too. I'm excited. We have one, like you said, 1 American, and also Bruno Mick. So, you know, the son of Lubo, my coach. So it's exciting to see him enter the race as well on the World Cup level.
Eddie Crăciun, the final Romanian, looking to knock his teammate out of the box in 20th place right now, Valentin Cretu. Eddie did not compete in the 2 World Cup races held here to close last season.
Oh, big problems with the settle. This is not the first time we've seen it this weekend. It's just such an unfortunate thing because now you're along for the ride. It's like a roller coaster, right? Once you start going up, there's no opportunity to exit, and he just knows that the race is done just from that start.
We saw it famously with Madeleine Egla yesterday. That was shocking.
Oh, it's brutal. Brutal. I got lucky. I had a skid, but and it very easily could have turned into that. So it's with this hard ice, it's easy when you're transitioning from such a high center of gravity down low, and there's a lot of moving parts. It's so easy for your sled to move kind of unilaterally or sideways as you're trying to settle and go straight. So it's easier than it looks to have that happen, but it's such an unfortunate thing.
The start mishap followed by a series of small little errors all the way down the track results in a 28th place time for Eddie Crăciun.
Right as he's going to settle, he settles unevenly and just so much lateral direction. That's really unfortunate. And then you see a little bit of extra pressure carried off of the exit of 14. But at that point, you just want the run to end as the athlete. You just want it to be done. Yeah, sorry, man. Summer's talked about it before, where there's different types of athletes, right? Some people, when you have one mistake, you let go of that pressure and you kind of allow yourself to perform like you never have before. And then there's some people that it's just will continue to snowball and mistake after mistake, and that's what we saw.
Aiden Mueller now the final American. He's in a little battle in the second tier with teammates Matt Greiner and Hunter Harris to try to get some regular World Cup experience. His best result, I believe, was a 28th place earlier this season. His first full season on the World Cup.
Aiden's done a great job coming up onto the senior circuit earlier than he expected as well. He did really well in our team trials this fall, so he didn't expect to be on World Cup this early. So it's now, but big skid coming off of 11, really high into 13. This is where it's so easy to flip, so he does a nice job of keeping it shiny side down, as we say, but that's a really rough run from Aiden.
Still skidding his way into the closing Kreisel. The American, one last tap at the finish line, 49.433 is his finish time.
That's a rough one. I know, clearly that's not what you want, right, coming into these things, but high on the end of 11, drifting up into, there's one rule when it comes to curve 12, it's do not have direction going into the curve, and that's what Aiden had. That's a really rough transition. I would have expected a sled to flip off of 13 with that, so he did a nice job, but that's really unfortunate that he was in that situation.
So the USA has only one athlete into run number 2, but it's a top 10 athlete at the moment, Tucker West, sitting in 8th place. Run number 1 now concludes with our final competitor and our youngest, and to boot, a singles and doubles athlete. with his father watching from behind. This is 17-year-old Bruno Mik of Slovakia.
He had a great day yesterday in doubles, and then to now come out in singles, it's so impressive, and it's really exciting to be able to watch.
There's a lot of interchange between Slovakia and the United States with your head coach from Slovakia as well.
Right. So I've known Bruno since he's been a lot younger. So it's really exciting, but big skid coming into 11 here. Huge save coming into 12, and he's back online already, which is really impressive, but that just scrubbed all of his speed. Look at him lay it back, though. He's committed.
Absolutely. As he makes his way down to the final few curves, Bruno Mik will conclude run number 1. When you were 17 years old, as he crosses here in 30th place, did you have a lot less fear than now? Are you just go get them and you have these mistakes, but then you just cruise back and let the sled run?
It's different. I think when I was 17, I questioned my abilities because there's so much to learn in this sport.
Sure.
And now
sure.
I question my body's capability. So luge is a sport where you're constantly reassessing and you're constantly learning, and it never gets old, and that's what keeps bringing us back, right? You're never going to have a perfect run, and there's always something to learn.
Very well put. Green light for Bruno Mik. No second run, but a great first weekend. His taste of the World Cup, and on a very challenging track at that. Nico Glacia leading the way. Christos Apiodes within a tenth of a second. That'll be fun in run number 2, as will be the battle for the other podium spots with Austria and Germany. There could be some other shuffling amongst these top 20. Valentin Cretu just making it in, just under a second off of the pace of the leaders. He'll be the first to go as these final 10 get eliminated from the competition. Well, another week, another country, another track, but it's Austria still dominating men's singles. Will that be what holds on? What do you expect to see in run number 2, Emily?
Ooh, I expect to see Christers really go for it and give
Make
him a run.
move.
Make a move. So
Yeah.
it's going to be really interesting. But Max as well. Max Langenheim, he's in 4th. He's not too far out of there. He's 200th off the podium. So that's going to be a fight. So it's going to be very exciting to see who makes it onto the final podium here.
Well, you see right there, run number 2 for the men's singles coming up locally at 12:37. We'll be on a few minutes before that, 5 minutes before. So tune back in at 12:32 local time. That's 11:32 Central European time. Emily and I with the call of the second run of men's singles luge from Sigulda.